Like many others, the US election of 2016 was equal parts shocking and revelatory for me. In the lead-up, I could not possibly fathom any way in which Donald Trump would win. Well, I, like many others, was wrong.
We are going to make this decision now. The Fox News decision desk has called Pennsylvania for Donald Trump. This means that Donald Trump will be the 45th President of the United States.
In the aftermath, I began questioning my understanding of society in general. To what degree was I living in my own bubble, insulated from a large portion of society who appeared to hold extremely different views than my own? Subsequent developments such as the Brexit vote and the rise of the alt-right seemingly point to a serious and widening divide in society. Granted, people have always had fundamental disagreements, but recent developments in technology seem to be exacerbating these issues as opposed to allowing people to connect. As a social studies teacher, an essential question in my practice has become, in a world that appears to be increasingly polarized, that the quote-unquote truth has become relative, how do I help my students develop the tools to become thoughtful and discerning citizens that can keep democracy healthy? The Oxford Dictionary chose post-truth as its word of the year in 2016 in response to the United States presidential campaign in which seemingly outrageous claims were made by Republican candidate Donald Trump. The word is defined as relating to or denoting circumstances in which objective facts are less influential in shaping public opinion than appeals to emotion and personal belief. For example, he claimed the unemployment rate was at 42% when it was actually 5%, and he boasted that he could save Americans $300 billion from a Medicare plan that didn't even spend that much in total. Politician Newt Gingrich summarized this phenomenon nicely.
What I said is equally true. People feel more threatened.
Yes, they feel it, but the facts don't support it.
As a political candidate, I'll go with how people feel, and I'll let you go with the theoreticians.
The phenomenon of politicians being less than honest and making appeals to emotion is not a new one. What was remarkable about 2016 was how the internet, specifically social media, allowed the spread of misinformation to reach incredible levels. At first, the advent of social media would appear to be a great thing. Finally, everyone has a voice. True democracy. Unfortunately, social media appears to be having more of an undermining effect on democracy as we know it. In the run-up to the 2016 election, stories like Pope Francis endorsing Donald Trump and the Democratic Party murdering Seth Rich were circulated at a truly staggering level. A study by Alcott and Gensko estimated that news stories that were demonstrably false were shared over 38 million times in the 3 months prior to the election. One potential theory for this massive increase in the sharing of misinformation is that platforms like Facebook, and more recently Twitter, do not simply list posts chronologically. Both use complicated algorithms which factor in elements such as how often an item has been shared or what a user has liked in the past, with the end goal of finding them content that they will enjoy or engage with. What this algorithm doesn't consider is whether a particular story is accurate or not. If a story has been shared enough, it gets bumped to the top of the feed. A sensationalistic but wrong story will generate much more engagement than a story that's accurate but less striking. A 2018 study by Vasogi, Royal, and Arel found that false news stories were 70% more likely to be retweeted than true stories were. True stories also took about 6 times as long to reach 1,500 people as it did for false stories to reach the same number of people. Furthermore, studies have shown that the more that a person has been simply exposed to an untrue story, the more likely they are to remember it as being true. Finally, automated programs called bots were used to help spread these stories. An analysis by Bessie and Farah found that approximately 400,000 bots were used to tweet out information about the US presidential election, and they were responsible for about 1/5 of the total conversation. These bots have been linked to corporate interests, political parties, and even foreign governments. Ironically enough, fake news was most effectively spread by humans though, not by bots. Paradoxically, as the internet has decentralized information sharing, control of the traditional media has become more concentrated. In 1983, 90% of the US media was controlled by 40 companies. By 2017, the same 90% was controlled by 6 corporations. These giant news conglomerates have been accused of blending information, opinion, and entertainment into a package that is simply used to sell advertising. Gay Alcorn describes the development of an increasingly privatized and fragmented public news that began with the soundbite and photo opportunity to bypass public discussion in the regime of the 24-hour news cycle, where news channels take on the mantle of party ideologies, often deliberately distorting the truth. Continuing, it's not so much that facts are futile, it's just that they take a while to collect and marshal into a knockdown argument. By the time the facts are gathered, the media moment has passed, the headline has been grabbed, and the lie can be modified, apologized for, or replaced by another. So how is all of this relevant to education? Well, as teachers, we have the fundamental responsibility to prepare our students how to function in an era that appears increasingly Orwellian. If we want to develop democratic citizens, we need to train students how to filter out the extra noise and become savvy consumers of media.